Everyone has to die. After death, there's nothing. My late father once said to me, "After you die, who knows what you had planned while you were alive?" Having said this much, he lifted his head arrogantly. A nearly despicable expression floated across his face. After hearing this, I remember glaring at him a few times and sneering inwardly twice. As for him, he strolled around the room. He was wearing a pair of old-fashioned shoes, and his nylon socks gave off a sour, sweaty smell. That smell permeated the room all summer, for he never opened windows. Father's bedroom was at the end of the house. When he went out, he had to go through all of our rooms, but we didn't need to go through his room. I went to see him about once a month. He generally closed his door and kept busy as a mouse with his large pile of old books. When I knocked, he was flustered when he came to the door. As he covered what he was working on, he led me around a large stack of disorganized books and settled me into an old chair beneath the window. The cushion, made of yellowing reed catkins, was lumpy and uncomfortable. When he and I talked, he blocked my line of vision with his broad body. Perhaps he was afraid that I'd see what he was working on. At the time, I regarded Father as an old man with nothing to do, a person who lingered on in a worsening condition in a dark room. Family members and neighbors thought the same thing. Because he'd been retired for years, you could say that he had retired from life a long time ago. Generally, no one thought much about him. Sure, he had a few foibles. You couldn't say he was sick just because he liked staying in his room and not going out. Old people always take things to extremes. It was time for me to visit Father again. I was a little concerned because he hadn't eaten much for a few days, and he wasn't in a good mood either. He was always angry, scolding people at the dinner table for no reason. Everyone was baffled by this. When he opened the door, his thin face was expressionless. I glanced into the room. He'd covered all the books with an old cloth, and the old chair had been moved away from the window. Father didn't seat me while we talked. He was standing too because, apart from that old chair, the only place to sit was a small stool. Ordinarily, he sat on it to straighten out his heap of old papers, but this time, for whatever reason, he had tucked the small stool under the bed. I stood there, chatting aimlessly of household trivia. As I talked, I was getting more and more flustered, for all I wanted was to escape from there as soon as possible, and steer clear of this awkward errand in the future. Through all of this, Father kept a straight face, and paced with his hands behind his back. All of a sudden, he stopped, walked over, and shoved open a side door that faced the courtyard. The room brightened at once. Only then did I notice that he had moved the cupboard and begun using the side door behind it that had been closed for years.